Are we already rolling?
Yeah, I guess we're already rolling. Let's fucking go.
Yep.
Hell Money Pod, Casey Rodomore, Aaron Red Wing, back at it.
Again.
Yep.
Despite, what the haters would like.
Neither
we're back at it.
Rain nor snow nor sleet nor mean tweets can keep us from delivering the mail.
I was sick last week, so we did cancel. I had a cold, so we did postpone to this week. But we're back now, and I think this episode and our next episode will both be quite political.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah, we're getting into it.
Tis the season. I actually don't know if this one or the next episode will be posted first, so I don't know. We might say weird things that we then contradict on an episode that's actually posted before.
That's not a new thing.
That's not a new thing, but we're
the continuity department at the Hell Money Pod headquarters is thin.
It's above Jason's pay grade.
Yeah.
So we're sort of loosely talking about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, but kind of more broadly, the inauguration is coming up. We're entering a new political dynasty, or rather a repeat of a political dynasty rerun.
Yep.
And we wanted to talk about kind of what we see Bitcoin's political future in the United States being.
Yep.
So assuming that we do have the David episode next, or maybe before this one, that one would probably be more specifically talking about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve aspect.
We're also just talking about like what David Bailey has a lot of like wacky ideas.
He's kind of the main character of like this last year for Bitcoin, to be honest.
Definitely.
So,
well, I think in terms of like
political.
Yeah, although I will say that I think that there are actually a lot of people who maybe are less flashy than David Bailey who do a lot of work. Like
that's not a main character.
Yeah.
The main character
true.
is
Yeah,
usually
true.
bolstered by people that are more deserving than the main character. Harry Potter didn't do anything.
Yeah, the main character he's the legible one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, David Bailey is the legible main character.
Yeah, David Bailey might be the Harry Potter, but there's like the whole Order of the Phoenix behind that's kind of doing all the legwork.
Getting zero credit.
Yeah, getting zero credit. Although I guess like with the Harry Potter analogy, we're probably more on like the Death Eaters Voldemort side with Trump.
Oh yeah. Trump is not in Gryffindor.
No.
100% no. Trump is a Slytherin. Like it's.
Do you know what Harry Potter house you are? Ravenclaw, right?
Who are the like nerd ones? Yeah, Nerd House.
Yeah, Nerd House.
Sure. Yeah. Or maybe Hufflepuff.
No,
I like cozy things. Hufflepuff is a cozy. Listen, the main reason to choose a house is if you like their like lounge.
That's true, but Hufflepuff is like social. Like they like people, they're friendly, they're helpful.
Okay.
I feel like Hufflepuff's main thing is that they're social and like loving and friendly.
Yeah, when I'm alone,
that's their strength.
I like to chill alone.
That's Ravenclaw or Slytherin.
Yeah, Ravenclaw.
And I think you're more of a Ravenclaw than a Slytherin.
Yeah, I'm not conniving.
No.
Zuck is in Slytherin.
Zuck is that. We'll talk about Zuckerberg. We're talking about, our general categories. The episode title that I have is Bitcoin Strategic Reserve / Vibe Shift. Because there has been a vibe shift with this inauguration. I mean, I think it was really with the election, or maybe it was like with Trump almost getting shot in July. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about tech oligarchs, or the tech oligarchy that I kind of see forming around Trump. I mean, we'll see with the tech oligarchs how much power they'll actually have, or how much power anyone will actually have with Trump.
Yep.
But that's kind of, I feel like that's a big part of the vibe shift, is tech is moving from kind of like in the Biden era or in the 2016 to 2024 era.
Yep.
They were sort of like the like police state on like free speech, like they were the ones that were kind of like laying down the law and enforcing certain things. Now we're kind of seeing them switch sides. Like the tech oligarchs. Yeah, I would have associated.
Are we laying out what we're going to talk about?
Sorry,
this episode?
I'm getting into it. Okay.
Yeah, we got it.
Sorry,
give you the overview.
So we're going to talk about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve,
specifically, and also not just the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, also like what the Trump administration might mean for Bitcoin and crypto more broadly, and strategic reserve and related, things. Yeah,
we're referencing Bitcoin Policy Institute put out a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve executive order draft, which they, would want to put on Trump's desk for him to sign, presumably, if they had their way. We're also referencing Galaxy Research before the election had this like table where they broke down different issues related to crypto policy.
Unfortunately, we printed it out on black and white. And so the color coding is completely gone.
It's completely gone, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what Biden, Harris, or Trump, we know who won.
Yeah, that's right.
So, but this at least kind of gives us some structure for talking about issues, not just related to Bitcoin Strategic Reserve, but like things like self-custody, mining, just like general regulation around crypto or Bitcoin. I also have the points that RFK Jr. sort of said he would do if he had been president. Which I'm kind of using as a proxy for Bitcoin Policy Institute, because it seemed to me like he was pretty, like, it was pretty detailed. Not to say that couldn't have come from him, but generally speaking, you have like an advisor that tells you what to say. So that's kind of the realm of Bitcoin related policy. And then we're going to talk about the tech oligarch vibes, just because it's on the mind.
Absolutely.
So what should we start with?
Let's talk about the vibe shift. I feel that it's really topical. I mean, I think it's pretty fascinating. I felt a huge sense of personal relief when Trump won. I'm not really a Trump fan. There's lots of things that I don't like about Trump. There's lots of things that I think are not great about him. I think he's hilarious. I think we got to give the man his due. Like, Absolutely. He's an excellent comedian. He's very funny.
He's a national treasure.
Yeah. But as far as like the way that Trump influences the discourse, like, I'm just like hedging here, the way that Trump influences the discourse, like, I'm not the most favorite of it, but I think the Democrats are really scary to me. The sort of the policing of speech, the identity politics, really trying to divide people along as many lines as possible. I think for naked political gain. I think the sort of race and gender hysteria, they're really my enemy. And they have controlled government. They've made a lot of things really unpleasant. California COVID lockdowns, more generally, like, right, we live in California. And so the California, legislature and government is controlled by Democrats. And so they're a very like proximal enemy. They're like right next
right in your
to us.
backyard.
Right in your backyard. I was walking to the gym this morning, fucking jacked now.
Yeah.
And like there were streets that like I had to like walk in the middle of the street because they were full of homeless people's like possessions, like parked there. It's a badly run state by a democratic government. And all this is to say, and also online, I'd felt a very oppressive feeling in this sort of like woke race and gender hysteria. A lot of things that didn't used to be offensive are now, were quote unquote offensive, et cetera. So the Democrats are really my proximal enemy.
Sure.
And so when Trump wins, and Trump beats my proximal enemy, I'm not a Trump fan, but I'm ecstatic that my proximal enemy got fucking trounced.
Well, and I think also Trump was almost one of the beautiful things about Trump is that he's such an unlikable, off-putting candidate from the perspective that you're talking about, where like he says like we're gonna make Greenland and Canada into state. Like he says stuff.
Yeah, I have a friend from Denmark who sent me like, he didn't send this to me personally. He sent this to like a bunch of his friends. This like panicked email where he's like, I can't believe this. Like this is incredible. Like out of the pale. Like
I think it's to me that sort of stuff. I don't know. Maybe I'm just too like ironic, like black-pilled, whatever.
You are pretty ironic black-pilled. Like sometimes we're having a conversation and I'm like, that would be bad. And you're like, well, it's all fake and gay.
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's not going to happen. I don't care. Like, I think, I don't even say that to mean like, I like Trump for those things. I think the point I'm trying to make is that those things make him such a fundamentally unfit candidate that the fact that he was so unilaterally elected to me indicates such a rejection of what the Democratic Party was putting forward, that's what made me happy and relieved. Is I was like, okay, the propaganda machine did not win here because Trump, the Trump propaganda machine is not anywhere close
to the optimal propaganda machine.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and also like, I'm, here in the Bay Area, like I see all this progressive shit. I don't actually know how much people believe it, how much people are buying into it. And it's very relieving to see at least some signs that people are not buying into it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, because they can't say it, right? Like they can't say that
private beliefs, public lies.
Yes, exactly. And I think it's just, it's reassuring that the way that I felt about this, that I can't say to many of my friends, although I do say it, it's more like they don't.
You kind of get away with it because you're like a girl. You're like, teehee.
Yeah. I think I can speak like I'm good at like code switching, if you will. Like I know how to like talk to different groups, and I know like what's actually important to different people. And I know for me, it's obvious. I can tell when someone flips into a mode where they're not thinking, they're regurgitating. Do you know what I mean? And I feel like I'm good at when someone flips into that mode, I know where the lines are because I exist in many corners of the internet. So like, I'm not likely to step on a landmine unsuspectingly. Do you know what I mean? Like if I'm talking to someone and all of a sudden they're very like inflamed about some issue that I know they've just seen from Instagram stories, I kind of know what the narrative that they're existing in is, and I know what things to avoid saying and where I can kind of press. So I think like my friend, I have racist friends, I have libtard friends, I have friends all over the spectrum. I think they kind of know where I stand generally, but I would say the thing that turns me off the most about the left side of it, if you even want to call it that, is the aversion to having a conversation. You know? And I think that's kind of where
their ideas just can't be challenged.
The MAGA Unity Party, I think, is like, that's where he succeeded, is he said like, you know, I'm bringing in all these outsiders that have essentially been like exiled from the Democratic Party, and we're all going to have this conversation. You know, how much of any of this will actually end up in the Trump administration is yet to be seen.
I think that is also an observation about living in the Bay Area, that people who are conservative in the Bay Area are often much easier to deal with and talk to because they expect to be disagreed with. They're
used to it.
They're used to it.
Yeah. It's just like an ease of conversation. I mean, even like, I remember it was a couple weeks ago now, but whenever the kind of H-1B conversation was happening, which was basically like short summary for any of you who have the delight of not being on that side of Twitter, it was basically kind of like identifying a rift between the Unity Party of MAGA tech oligarchs, where, you know, there's one side of the spectrum that really wants to increase immigration for tech jobs, right? Like you want more H-1B visas, you want more like Indian, Chinese, whatever, immigrants to come in and to take these tech jobs and like work really hard and for less pay. Like that's definitely like something that many of, like Elon Musk is maybe representative of that side of the spectrum. Then there's this like America First perspective that it also exists within the MAGA Unity Party, where they're like, we don't want immigrants taking jobs, whether it's on the lower end of the spectrum or the higher end of the spectrum. Like we need to prioritize Americans. That debate is one that we have not been able to have for years, you know?
Because the prevailing narrative has been like very like open borders, like no discussion of the pros and cons of immigration.
Like it's like that's a conversation that like I can see both sides of, right? Like I land on one side maybe, like I'm generally more for like, you know, people who do good work should be able to get the job, and like immigration on that aspect is probably good. But I can understand the other side of it, right? And I also understand how it's ideologically consistent with a lot of what Trump ran on and what was very popular about what Trump ran on, especially in 2016. But that's a conversation, and even how that plays into affirmative action, which was like more relevant for me because I was in academia, like the Asian
female Native American,
and the
affirmative
ideal,
action beneficiary,
right? The ideal DEI hire, like, you know, there's a whole side of the affirmative action conversation which has to do with like Asians that was never able to be even like, you can't, like I would mention that to people and they wouldn't have even.
What do you mean in particular?
Like, so, you know, affirmative action, this idea that like we need to give more opportunities to like certain races or groups, like where do Asians fit into that? Right? Asians fit into the category of white people. But if you say that to someone who is like in my experience in academia, who like is very much like pushing these policies, they don't realize that.
And
they think, well,
also like people who are Asian and describe themselves as like BIPOC or people
exactly.
of color.
There's this confusion, like,
bro.
But I think a lot of it is because like we can't even have those conversations about like okay, I can get in the weeds with you about the cultural Marxism stuff. Like I understand that perspective of this idea of like you know, all these different hierarchies of oppression. I'm not saying I think it's the way we should organize society. I definitely don't think that's like the primary thing we should use to try to like model our society off of, because it's like I mean, really, the big complaint I have with it is like there's no end to it. Like, at what point did the oppressed classes move around?
Oh, yeah. And that's why, I mean, in Marxist ideology, it's all about this crazy future utopia.
Yeah.
You have to bill it like, oh, yeah, through this conflict, we're going to reach this utopia. It's like, when, guys?
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's no end to it. And there's kind of no readjusting that can even happen within the framework. You know, you're basing it off of like metrics from 20 years ago and like giving no space for anything to change.
Yep.
But like, whatever, if you want to have that perspective, I can have that conversation with you, but there's not even an ability to have that conversation with the way that the left or the Democrats or whatever you want to call them have organized their political discourse. You know, they've made it such that like no one can have these conversations. And so whenever the H-1B conversation was happening, of course, there was like lots of crazy racist rhetoric flying around that was like not great to see. But in a lot of ways, I was like, this is actually getting into the weeds of where we agree and disagree.
Yep.
You know, we're actually getting to like specific things here that actually play out. Yep. Not like this abstract idea of a utopia that we want to see and how we can like reach the utopia through our policies, but like actually talking about right now. So I don't know. I think like in terms of vibe shift, I'm optimistic for just like, I don't think we're going to reach conclusions or we're going to reach like resolutions unless we're able to get into the nitty gritty. And if you just shut down all of that conversation, like that's the end. Yep. You know? Yep. So that's kind of the vibe shift aspect that I felt the most relieved over. Like, I'm not super worried about being like canceled personally. I feel like I already kind of reconciled with that. Like being an astrologer, you know what I mean? Like I've gone through my own arc of being like, you know, whatever, like the only person that can cancel you is yourself. And ultimately like, just because there's a vocal minority doesn't mean that represents like any tangible reality. But like, I am happy to see discourse happening.
Yeah, well, I think it's something that feels a little bit different between the left and the right. And I don't know if that's a permanent thing or whatever, but on the left, you have this idea of no enemies to the left. Like if you're sort of like a middling, you know, leftist progressive, it is anathema to criticize the more radical wing of the left. You don't look over those people, even those people you don't disagree with them at all. You fully focus on like the right, right? I feel like there's maybe a little bit less of that on the right, that everything within the right is sort of up for criticism. I don't want to say that it's like perfect or that they don't over focus on the left, which they probably do, but that there is a bit of that sort of tendency that they're less like no enemies on the right.
I think it depends on where you are, because I think if you're on the very left side, the liberals are right wing to you. Like there is a lot of infighting.
No enemies to the left, but the
right,
but the liberals,
everyone who's like it's like everyone who's closer to the right than
is
you
a fascist.
Is a fascist.
Yeah, is a fascist.
Yeah, it was actually kind of interesting. There was this one band that like they've just gone like totally off the rails. Deerhoof, if like whatever, they're just like some indie band.
I know them.
You know Deerhoof?
Yeah, I know Deerhoof.
Deerhoof has gone like totally, like you still have to mask at their shows. Like they're like totally off the rails, like crazy.
Yeah.
And they're like official Instagram.
Does the singer mask?
Yeah. Like the whole, it's
while
like, it's very
singing?
intense. Like but yes, they take it very seriously. And their entire Instagram account has just like transformed. And like Tyler updates me about like, he'll be like, oh my God, you should see this new post. And it's like the things that they'll post will be like the ravings of a lunatic. Like, and it was interesting. They posted about the fires in LA, which sending prayers to LA.
Yep. Thoughts and prayers.
Thoughts and prayers. California is, you know, we got our problems.
The most dysfunctional policies.
Yeah. Don't even get me started. But they were posting about it and they were talking about how Karen Bass is like a right-wing fascist.
Who's that?
Karen Bass is the mayor of LA that was elected in 2022. That's like extremely, like probably the most progressive mayor LA has ever had. Yep. Like diverted funds away from firefighting in order to like put it into like homeless and illegal immigrant support. Like it's like so, it was just awesome to read like this like, yeah, it was awesome, honestly. Like reading it, I was like, wow, like I'm really getting into like a crazy headspace with this, you know? So like, yeah, you're right. There's no enemies to the left. And then anyone who's to the right of you is an enemy. But I don't know, was it always like this? Like, I feel like in the Bush years, it was different, don't you think?
Well, things just got like much less polarized. And I think that people on the extreme left have moved into the Overton window when before they were outside of the Overton window. right? Like the Overton window has like kind of shifted. And so these more extreme left-wing ideas can be discussed in the mainstream. Whereas Bush era, like maybe that wasn't so much of a thing.
I mean, the thing I would say to that is also, I don't think that the Overton window is one axis. Like, I think you could maybe separate it into like economic versus social. And because I don't really think that we're existing in a reality where leftist economic policy is anywhere close to power.
Yeah.
It honestly isn't.
It's mostly been, I mean, I think we had this conversation a couple days ago that extreme left-wing economics has been completely discredited simply through being tried and being shown to be an absolute failure. There's no country on earth where there are no two countries on earth where you have a country with more socialist policies and a country with less socialist policies, and otherwise they're comparable, but the country with the more socialist policies is doing better. It's all North and South Korea, China versus Hong Kong and Taiwan. It's, Eastern Europe versus Western Europe. So simply through the passage of time and seeing how these policies like work out, they're just completely discredited. They're not serious policies as a result of that.
I mean, I think you can make the argument for social safety net being something that has, many European countries. I think of like the Scandinavian countries. Right?
Sure. I'm saying more extreme policies.
Yeah. Like I think there's a level of that has been successful, but I think it's predicated on a very specific societal setup that is not the like open borders, like woke thing. Like those two things are not like associated with each other.
Yeah.
Like you can have like very isolationist countries that have like very strong social safety nets.
I also don't know if it's necessarily true. I mean, people always point to Sweden. Sweden, people pay enormously high taxes. There are problems with the social services there. It's a hard issue. But yeah, I definitely agree that the open borders is incompatible with extensive wealth with redistribution.
Yeah, and I mean, I also would say those countries that I'm naming like are maybe 10 years ago, I would point to as like huge successes, but are on the decline now.
Yeah.
It's, I think globalism in general makes that model a lot more difficult.
Yep. And Europe is, I mean, it's insane. If you look at the per capita GDP of Europe, it's like behind Mississippi or some shit. And if you look at economic growth over the last 20 years, the US and Europe used to be neck and neck. And now Europe has is stagnating basically, and has fallen way behind.
But like, I don't think that woke ideology and capitalism are like woke capitalism is a model that works for like a lot of, I would say, standard Democrat liberals. Like they might use the words anti-capitalist because it's like flashy.
Yeah.
But like woke even like as an example, people used to complain a lot about like the body positivity stuff. Like, oh man, they're using fat models and they're doing all this body posy stuff. It's like, well, but that's their target consumer at this point. Like, like if you just look at the demographics of America, like it's not even really a woke thing. Like that's just capitalism. But I think those two things can kind of blend together. And like those two things actually I think can work well together.
Yeah.
And I think the woke capitalists are actually probably more representative of like a Barack Obama style Democrat than like, I wouldn't consider Barack Obama to be like left wing substantially.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
So I don't know. Anyway, like whatever, we're kind of going off on a tangent here, but like for however long, I think probably since 2015 or 2016, we just haven't been able to like get at the nuances of these things in like any of these conversations like had to happen in private, you know, like you can't tweet about these things. You can't have these conversations on a podcast because there's a certain demographic that will label you a fascist. If you don't care about that, you can have those conversations. And I think that's actually been the vibe shift is that like people have realized either that those, statements don't have as much power as maybe they initially felt they did back in 2015 when it felt like a death sentence for that to happen to you, or if it's just a matter of like those people losing power slowly over time. I don't know what it is, but it's like that I think is the vibe shift is people don't care anymore.
Part of it is 2014, 2015. If you weren't kind of paying attention to the amount of polarization that was starting to happen and you got a lot of like hate for something you said or did, you didn't have the automatic response like, oh yeah, the country's polarized and now like double-digit percentage of people are just crazy. And those are the people that I'm getting hate from. And so I shouldn't care about it. Mm-hmm. You were like, oh, I'm getting all this hate. This is terrible.
You were like, I need to do some listening and learning.
Yeah. And instead of being like, oh, I need to do the opposite of listening, I need to just like not pay attention to these nutsos at all.
Yeah.
And just live my life.
Yeah, but it is kind of a bummer to me. I see the vibe shift happening a lot in my more maybe like male coded interests on the internet. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's happening in my girls and gays coded interests on the internet. Oh yeah, in your
girls and gay TikTok and Instagram
spheres. It's still the same over there. And I don't know what to do. You know what I mean? Like I feel like, yeah, I'm kind of disappointed in them, but I'm also like, maybe this is just the way of the world. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like men concern themselves with certain issues and the girls and gays concern themselves with certain issues and like whatever.
Could be.
You know?
Yeah. So the other part of the vibe shift is the Bitcoin vibe shift.
Right.
Vibes are incredibly high.
I don't know. We're at 90K today, so.
Yeah, but I mean, we're at 90K. Like we're like, Trump's going to get in. Daddy Trump, he's going to pump our bags, you know?
Yeah. I mean, do you think Trump will pump our bags?
So, I mean, So I actually think that a more friendly government, more friendly regulation to Bitcoin and crypto is actually likely not necessarily to really benefit Bitcoin the most.
Why do you say that?
So the hostile policy against Bitcoin and crypto has largely been against like degen crypto activities. You've been able to buy and hold Bitcoin in the United States for a long time with excellent access, right? Coinbase has been around for like 6, 7, 8 years at this point, maybe longer. I don't remember when Coinbase was founded, where you could just link your bank account and buy Bitcoin in the United States. Now we've got other sites like River, which is great and is Bitcoin only. Lots of exchanges like Kraken and stuff where you can just go buy Bitcoin. But getting access to a bunch of degen shitcoins is much harder due to regulation. These are the things that, you know, everybody agrees that Bitcoin is not a security. Everybody. That's mainstream position, even within the Biden administration, even within, you know, Gary Gensler, SEC. He's never said anything about Bitcoin being a security, like period. It's actually everything else that is much more, maybe it's a security. Maybe it's unauthorized money transmission. Maybe it's X, maybe it's Y, maybe it's Z. And so I suspect that over the last 4 years of the Biden administration, that has been the stuff that's been getting tamped down hard. Obviously, it's not great for Bitcoin to have a sort of generally unfriendly administration, but that Bitcoin has not been getting the brunt of that. It's been shitcoins. It's been DeFi. It's been all this bullshit. And so a more friendly administration, yeah, it's probably good for Bitcoin, you know, just generally, but it's going to be way better for degen Web3 bullshit and stablecoins, like banks being able to touch stablecoins, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Like if banks started letting people buy and sell Bitcoin, obviously that would be great, but people already have pretty good access to that. There's a Bitcoin ETF, right, that got launched. Maybe that would have gotten launched sooner under a different administration. But basically that, you know, Bitcoin has gotten some of the heat from this administration, but altcoins, shitcoins, and DeFi and stablecoins have gotten more of the heat. And so as a result, when we get this new administration that's probably just friendlier to everything, Bitcoin won't outrageously pump. Now that's assuming there isn't a very dramatic policy change specific to Bitcoin, such as a strategic Bitcoin reserve or a exception to capital gains when you use Bitcoin as a currency. Obviously, those specific things would be very positive for Bitcoin. However, those things are actually the things that I think are the least likely to happen. I think the guaranteed thing is like a general thaw and like better regulation. But those specific things that benefit Bitcoin, I think, are less likely because they're more extreme. And as a result, I think Bitcoin will benefit, but not as much as other things, and maybe not an incredible amount, you know, as not like, you know, Bitcoin 200K in like 6 months, you know?
Yeah, think my main point of disagreement would be, I think the biggest impact that any of this has is on the institutional level. Like, I agree with you on an individual level. It's way easier for you to get Bitcoin as an individual than it is for you as an institution.
Yeah,
you know?
Yep.
And I think, but individuals are moving around much less money than institutions are.
Yep.
And so I think when it comes to a Bitcoin ETF, a Bitcoin strategic reserve, or even just like literally like better or clearer regulation around Bitcoin or crypto in general, I don't think we're going to see pension funds adopting an altcoin portfolio.
True. Yeah,
I
that's
do
true.
think we will see pension funds adopting Bitcoin.
Yeah, very, very possible.
I mean, even I was home over Christmas and like my aunt told me like that her financial advisor was like, oh yeah, probably, you know, within the next year, we might be adding Bitcoin to the portfolio.
Okay.
Like,
all right.
You know, and she was like, oh, my financial advisor, like, do you have thoughts on this? What is a Bitcoin ETF? She literally asked me what a Bitcoin ETF was. I was like, damn, that's crazy. But I think like that's, obviously, if you view it from like the sovereign individual perspective, I think I agree with you that like, you know, the sketchy things legally are not really your ability to buy and hold Bitcoin. It's more like your ability to participate in the intergalactic casino of crypto.
Yep.
But I think on an institutional level, which is where you're seeing like billions or trillions of dollars moving, that, you know, I've seen some talks about like an Ethereum ETF. But
Isn't
like,
there an Ethereum ETF?
I
think there is an Ethereum
Yeah,
ETF.
that's
It's just not doing amazing.
Right. Like that's the thing. Like maybe you see something like that emerge. Like, but like, what is like, you know, like an altcoin ETF? Like, what does that even look like? You know?
Well, I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like 90% down in 1 year.
Yeah, exactly.
Like it's not even that the regulation is stopping it. It's like Coinbase has done that. Coinbase has done like automatic investing in like the top 10 coins by market cap. And I think over any time horizon, that has been a real turd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think we're seeing like the era potentially of like Bitcoin institutional adoption and Bitcoin as digital gold, which like, I mean, Bitcoin gold parity means a 10x.
LFG.
So
okay. Yeah. Good point. Good point. I don't disagree with that at all.
I don't know. I mean, I'm looking at the table that we have of like different parts of policy. I think probably like mining is where like the self-custody stuff, like going back to what you were saying about like regulation making it more or less friendly to do Bitcoin related things in the US. Probably mining policy is the most like energy usage.
Yeah. And
that's
also
probably the thing that's the biggest change.
Also, yeah, energy usage and also being directly friendly to Bitcoin mining. And also that could set off competition between nation states. If Trump is like, let's fucking go, we're going to make all the Bitcoin in America, like strategically, if you're another country, you should probably start paying attention.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Like I think that's somewhere where it's like, you know, the miners are probably, you know, compared to like an SEC style, like investigation of like securities or like for crypto and DeFi shit, like probably Bitcoin miners are the most persecuted just in terms of, yeah, their energy usage. They get unbanked all the time.
Yep.
And they're always kind of like going in between Bitcoin and fiat. Like they're probably the institution that does that the most, or the part of the ecosystem that does that the most. And they have all these hard costs that they have to buy in fiat usually. So that's probably the part that seems the most like, I mean, there is no major mining infrastructure of any other cryptocurrency on that scale.
Yep.
You know, it's Bitcoin.
Oh yeah, it's all proof of stake. They've all just given up.
They've given it up. They're like, we're just going to not do that stuff. The stuff that actually matters.
It's too
that
hard.
Makes this real.
It's
we're
too
just not
expensive. You know,
we're just going to
we'll just
all that
put the
out.
coins in our own pocket. It's much easier.
Yeah, exactly. So like, I do think probably in terms of energy usage, and energy usage is like a bigger conversation, I think, with tech. In terms of like friendliness towards tech.
Yep.
Because you can also put AI in that bucket as well. Like AI, you need to use a crazy amount of energy.
Yep.
And so like if you have this, you know, a lot of like the Biden administration policies that ended up affecting crypto were like bundled into this like climate change rhetoric, you know, like this idea of like, we need to use less energy. This is like using the entire amount of energy of Iceland or whatever. Like we need to shut this down.
Actually, probably not Iceland, because Iceland has a ton of geothermal energy.
What's the country that they usually, I thought it was Iceland, but maybe I'm wrong.
Iceland is not a good choice because they have a lot of geothermal energy. So they actually locate a lot of very energy intensive industries in Iceland, like aluminum production.
Yeah.
So it's probably like Greenland, maybe.
Yeah, or like Belgium or something.
Belgium, one of the shitty European countries.
Yeah, I'm just like imagining, like I'm just thinking of like the very classic talking points about like Bitcoin mining uses the amount of energy that could power blah, 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 you know, and like that sort of rhetoric is probably the most actively antagonistic to Bitcoin right now, you know, because I agree with you on an individual level, like there hasn't really been a huge threat to you going and buying Bitcoin and transferring it onto your wallet.
Yeah, I think maybe the institutions being more comfortable with Bitcoin, banks being more comfortable with Bitcoin, so increasing institutional adoption just because they feel like it's a more reasonable thing to do. It's not like crazy. And also kicking off that nation state competition that gets us to gold parity.
Exactly.
All right. Never mind. I'm back on the Bitcoin 200K by 6 months from now train.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, we'll see. I think there's probably, because the thing is, like, this is also assuming a trajectory where Trump Bitcoin policy is like the only thing that's affecting the market. Trump has lots of crazy ideas.
Yeah, Trump is
lots of things that could affect the market positively and negatively.
Trump is chaotic,
yeah,
and Bitcoin is trading more and more like a global macro asset, and global macro assets don't really like chaos.
Yeah,
right. So that's a negative.
Yeah, I think we'll probably see some sort of flash crash kind of volatility, not necessarily related to anything that's going on with Bitcoin. You know what I mean? It's just Bitcoin is the most volatile of, if you then put Bitcoin in this category of like global macroeconomic assets, Bitcoin is the most volatile by far.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
So I think we probably will see any sort of chaotic thing that comes from Trump on a geopolitical level, which will definitely happen in some capacity. I think we probably will see like Bitcoin drops as a result.
Yep.
So I don't know. That's why I hedge the 200K in 6 months thing. Cause it's like, I mean, like even Doge, right? Like I don't mean Doge, the cryptocurrency. I mean like Department of Government Efficiency, like making major sweeping changes. It's something that presidents don't do because they have to deal with the short-term effects.
Yep.
Even if there's long-term rewards.
Yeah. I don't actually think the Doge will be able to get very much done. Like,
well, aren't they just trying to like eliminate shit?
Well, so
Department of Government Efficiency.
Yeah, right.
You know?
I mean, so the issue is that like a lot of the bureaucracies that exist, they exist and are harmful because of the huge amount of regulations that are on the books. Like the IRS has this crazy like 200 million page tax code or whatever that they enforce, and Doge has no authority to make that tax code actually simpler. The more important thing is the tax code. If we had like a flat income tax with no deductions, the IRS would shrink itself.
Yeah.
Right? Like it would shrink itself. Like everything would get simpler. You'd have way less complicated bullshit. Audits would be way simpler. There'd be way more tax compliance, et cetera, et cetera. The IRS would shrink. You wouldn't even need to really like shrink its budget. Like it would just shrink. Now, if you're going to keep the size of the regulation constant that these agencies are enforcing, I don't know if Doge can actually find these like big cuts that they can make, unless somehow they're getting rid of these agencies entirely, which again, like they don't have the authority to, right? Like they're just, Doge is bureaucrats, right?
Yeah.
And so, okay, they don't really have any power. We have a lot of checks and balances. We have like, legislation that's got to like pass. Republicans are not the party of small government. Like if you look at the size of the government under Republicans and Democrats, somebody would have to tell you who's in power for you to figure out what the difference is. Right?
Yeah.
They're both huge government parties. So Doge, yeah, I don't know. I hope that they're able to find these crazy, things. But when they say like slash the head count at the IRS, like what? So we have the same crazy regulations, but now everything takes longer. Like it gets more expensive because they've got to like hire people out. Like, I don't know. I think that you need to do the Malay style afuera, where you just like absolutely be like, this branch of government, this agency will no longer exist, right? Like just get rid of the Department of education, like fuck it, it's gone. Get rid of 99% of the the FDA and whatever, like have the FDA, instead of test for efficacy and safety, just test for safety, right?
Sure.
But Doge doesn't have the power to do those like really sweeping cuts. Doge can just kind of, just like the existing Office of Government Accountability, the GAO, Government Accountability Office, yeah. There are agencies that put out these reports about how wasteful, government agencies that put out reports about how wasteful the the government is. And they're often like damning when you read it. They're like, yeah, I'm at the Government Accountability Office. I'm writing this paper. We tried to audit the Pentagon. Basically, it's like a multi-trillion-dollar black hole. Like they say that in black and white in the reports, like failed audits. So the addition of a new agency is an increase in the size of government.
That's so true.
Right?
You're right. They're just making more bureaucracy to deal with the bureaucracy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So maybe it'll be different. Maybe Elon and Vivek have the magic touch or something, but I don't know.
Yeah, I think it kind of depends on, I mean, I think you're right. And then I think going back to the conversation about like, so what's the price action? It's like, okay, then what you're describing is like, essentially just like friendlier policy to Bitcoin. Like I think friendlier policy to Bitcoin is an easy thing for him to do.
Yep.
Even small things would make a difference, right?
Well, also
or even just a sentiment, a vibe shift makes a difference, right?
Well, definitely because a lot of the enforcement against Bitcoin has been informal.
Yeah.
So it has been a result of vibes from coming down on high. So if those vibes change, presumably the enforcement and how the banks deal with these things will improve greatly.
Right. So let's say that there's actually like Trump is not able to make a lot of change, but there's this sort of general vibe shift that's like in a more positive direction for Bitcoin. Maybe there's certain policy things that actually happen, whatever. I think that's like a 200K in 6 months scenario, right? Because it's essentially stability.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. I'm very bad at predicting price.
I just
though.
mean like going back to what I was saying before about like it's external volatility that I think is more a question for Bitcoin price in the short term.
Yep.
If there's less external volatility because Trump is not able to be effective, he's not able to annex Greenland or whatever he's trying to do, then like I think just a slightly friendlier attitude changes a lot. And I think we're already seeing that in the price. You know, it's like Trump got elected. Biden's still president right now. He won't be by the time we've posted this episode.
Barely president. He hasn't been president for a while.
Right.
He's got like
Biden administration.
He's got
is in
2
charge.
good hours between noon and 2 p.m. every day.
Yeah. Like it's just, I mean, like there's been no change right now is my point. And we still saw like a 2x almost.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
And so I think in the scenario you're describing where there's actually not that much change Trump can make or whatever, maybe we see less volatility overall. And so it's just like a
More
continual friendly.
Up only.
Yeah, a continual friendly up only.
Yeah. Okay.
I tend more on I think Trump's going to go in there swinging. I just don't think we're going to know what he's going to swing at.
Well, I mean, let's talk about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve.
Right.
Like, do you think that is going to happen?
I think it's okay. Well, there's different. Okay. So if you just look at the executive order draft that Bitcoin Policy Institute put out, which presumably is not something Trump's just going to sign and put out there, although he could, I guess. They have a couple different things. I went through and just tried to make bullet points. So I'll just go through them first. So one of them is just to sort of acknowledge the Bitcoin that the US government already has.
The seized Bitcoin from Silk Road and criminals and stuff like that.
Which is about 200,000 Bitcoin.
Okay.
It's a lot of Bitcoin.
A lot of Bitcoin.
So the US government currently has 200,000 Bitcoin that they've just sort of been like, about. And there's always been this question of like, are they going to sell it all? Are they going to keep it? What's going to happen? Right now, it's effectively like locked up, you know, like Satoshi coins.
Yep.
So the first part is like the US should acknowledge, take control, consolidate the Bitcoin that it already has, which is about 200,000 Bitcoin, and then designate that Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset. So say, okay, this is ours, and we're adding this to our strategic reserve, which they already have a strategic reserve. I can't remember. I think I wrote down what it's called. Exchange Stabilization Fund. So the Exchange Stabilization Fund, this is what I got from reading this draft, I'm not an expert, is basically there's like $200 billion worth of funds that are mostly in what are called IMF special drawing rights, which are basically like a claim to a basket of currencies that's managed by the IMF.
IMF special drawing rights are really weird. They actually come from this hypothetical like international currency that was put forward as an idea by John Maynard Keynes, I believe. They're this sort of like weird like neutral basket of currencies, and you can have them. Basically, only countries can have IMF special drawing rights. Yeah. I want to say that Keynes had the idea of the Bancor, which would be this like sort of synthetic currency. I don't remember the details. That was a more like crazy thing, like one world government, one currency. But the modern version of that is these IMF special drawing rights. Right.
So right now we have this like exchange stabilization fund, $200 billion worth that like 150 of that is in IMF special drawing rights. So the idea with the Bitcoin strategic reserve is that you take the 200,000 Bitcoin the US government already has, and you say, okay, this is ours, and we're putting that in this fund as Bitcoin. So then Bitcoin would make up like, approximately 10% or something.
I actually think that's a great idea. I mean, actually it's complicated things, but Bitcoin fits in with the assets in the exchange stabilization fund.
I think that part will happen.
Bitcoin.
I think that part will happen.
Yeah.
The question then is, so the US government could then say, all right, and we're selling it all right now, right?
Yep.
Like that gives them then the right to do whatever they want with it. They could sell it. They could, exchange it for other things. Like whatever they want to do with it, it unlocks those previously like locked up coins. So in that case where it's like, they add it to the fund and then they say, okay, and we're going to exchange it for IMF tokens.
Fucking IMF
like
tokens
we're going to give
back.
the 200,000 Bitcoin to the IMF in exchange for, $50 billion worth of IMF token. Like that's bad for Bitcoin.
Yep.
I think that first part, just acknowledging that they have the Bitcoin, saying this is ours, we're not giving it back to Ross Ulbricht or whatever. Like, and that's, kind of good or bad. Like, I don't know. I can see arguments. I just think that's what will happen. I'm not really like, I don't care to really say whether that's good or bad because I just think that's an obvious thing that they will do. It kind of doesn't matter if I think it's good or bad.
Yep.
So like they put that into their strategic reserve asset. Then if you continue through that executive order, like I think that up until that point will happen. Then if you continue, they then say in this executive order draft from Bitcoin Policy Institute that then the US government should allocate an additional $21 billion to acquire Bitcoin, buy more Bitcoin. That to me seems like, okay, like, I know that there's this whole kind of world where, like Dylan Healy or whatever is like, his job is just like buying Bitcoin for some big fund, right? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Metaplanet. Like, I understand that's a thing.
Dylan LeClaire.
Sorry. Yeah.
Dylan Healy.
There's two Dylans.
He skates around.
Yeah. Like, I understand that there's like, pseudoscience to that of like, timing the market, acquiring the thing. I don't see how the US government makes a statement that they're going to buy $21 billion of Bitcoin and that doesn't just like instantly skyrocket the price to the point that like the US government is, and by like proxy, the taxpayer is just like on the hook for buying Bitcoin at being the fucking top of the market.
Yeah, exit liquidity.
Yeah, like it's literally you're setting the US government up to be exit liquidity, whatever, But then what they also want is for all the acquired Bitcoin, I don't know if this applies for the Bitcoin they already have or just for the stuff that's been bought, that the US government would then hold that for more than 25 years. That's part of the idea. It's like, you're not buying it to like,
this really just seems
trade.
like a policy that Bitcoiners wrote to pump their bags.
Exactly. It's like, okay, like that's what I'm saying. Like, it's like parts of it.
Like
I'm
what? Like, should the government even not sell the Bitcoin it has if it's an opportune time to do so? Like, maybe they should. Like, yeah, this seems really self-serving.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, that's insane to me. Like, I think it makes sense. Like, the government has 200,000 Bitcoin. They should just like decide that that's the case. It's sitting in limbo, whatever. They have it. That's the situation that we're in. They're not returning it. They shouldn't sell it. I think they shouldn't sell it. They already have it.
And this next
they got
part,
it for free by stealing it.
Yeah, and this next part about transferring. Well, yeah, like I mean, in a moral sense, if we're making moral judgments, the government should just not exist instantaneously. But like, I do think it does make sense for the U.S., which apparently is on this draft, to transition to highly secure self-custody. That I do think that the Bitcoin self-custody is not that hard. The government should have a plan for how it's going to secure Bitcoin, and whatever Bitcoin it has should be held that way. And they should do quarterly proof of reserves. That doesn't seem crazy to me at all. That seems like a very reasonable thing. Even if you're saying like, hey, like we're not even going to change how much Bitcoin we have or what our policy is, how we're going to acquire it. We're just going to make sure that we have the ability to custody the stuff. And whatever we do have, we're going to custody. That is a great first step to setting up, more friendly policies in the future that are maybe less crazy, right? That you're not talking about like, figure out how to hold this stuff, like figure out who controls it, figure out what the protocols are, right? You actually do, have it and how to custody it. That'd be awesome.
Yeah, 100. I mean, it's just like the stuff about buying more and then also agree. They literally used HODL in the executive order.
You can't do that, guys.
I'm
You're
like,
not
guys.
on Twitter. You're writing this for legislation. Like, Jesus.
They're like, the US government will hold Bitcoin for no less than 25 years, in parentheses, HODL. Like,
that is so cringe. That is so fucking cringe.
Yeah, it's like, I think like there's aspects of the Bitcoin strategic reserve that seem obviously strategic for the US government. And there's aspects of that specific executive order that seem obviously strategic to
Cynthia
Bitcoiners.
Loomis just wiling out.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I will say, I've said this before, like Bitcoin is the perfect lobbyist, and it's because like Bitcoin co-ops everything that it touches.
Yep.
Like it's like, you know, the people that are writing this are obviously holders of Bitcoin, so they're like, yes, like more favorable policy to Bitcoin. Like Bitcoin is great. And then like the US government saying, hey, this 200,000 Bitcoin, that's ours. Like then everything they do is going to be like, well, but we have to protect number go up. You know, like it's like, it's this beautiful set of incentives where like anyone who holds it is psyoped into wanting number to go up, even if it's like against other things.
Yeah.
And so in that way, like you don't even need like a guy in a suit to get a meeting with someone. It's like you just literally send Bitcoin to Trump. You, as the US government, acknowledge that you have Bitcoin, and like all of a sudden you're lobbied like in its favor. But yeah, I don't know. I don't look at that draft as being, as I said, I don't think Trump is just going to sign off on it and that's what's going to happen. That seems crazy to me. Maybe I'm wrong, but that doesn't seem like something that's going to happen. I do think like, you know, if you view it as a negotiation, starting there and then agreeing to, okay, the 200,000 Bitcoin that currently is in custody of the US, we're going to consolidate it. We're going to make sure it's secure and we're not going to sell it. For 25, we're going to hodl.
You're going to hodl for 25
We're going to hodl for 25
Get rid of those, some of those IMF special drawing rights. That sounds like fucking communism.
Oh yeah, fuck that, dude.
Things like the yen are in IMF special drawing rights. The yen, the euro. Why the fuck are we holding these other countries' fucking currency?
These altcoins.
Yeah, these fucking altcoins. US dollar, Bitcoin, gold. Like, what else do you need?
I don't even think there's gold in the strategic reserve.
Very cucked.
Yeah, it's
very
crazy.
cucked.
Yeah, so it's kind of just like add gold back to that. Like digital gold. You know, that like to me that feels very obvious. It feels like something that's easy for Trump to do. And that alone, I mean, that would, in ways, like that's an easy price pump. The other thing though is that it does unlock previously locked supply, right? Sure. Like, so if the US government is moving and acknowledging those coins, that also means they can sell them. Even if they say they won't, like they could still sell them. Right now, it's kind of this like, and I think this is in general the case for Bitcoin and crypto, is like, we currently are in such a gray area with certain aspects of regulation that there's like pros and cons, you know? There's ways that the regulatory gray area like seriously benefits things that are operating as securities, right? Like these altcoins that if there was more clear policy, like they wouldn't be allowed to exist, or they would be like, you know, persecuted more severely by the SEC, but because they're in this kind of gray area, they sort of benefit from that. Like that's also the drawback for things like institutional adoption. So I think what will happen is the US government will acknowledge that it has that Bitcoin. Hopefully it then like does digital Fort Knox and like very highly securely self-custodies it. And then doesn't sell. Like that would be the optimal outcome that I think is decently likely. I don't know how much I trust the government to do a great job with their self-custody. It doesn't seem like it would be hard. But it feels like the kind of thing that the government would probably spend way too much money on. But they would get it right. Okay.
You know what I mean? Like that, like, okay, like listen, the government spends way too much money on tanks, but we have some fucking awesome tanks. Kind of like that vibe, right? Like it's, and dude, if we lost the Bitcoin, like, oh man, clown show. That
could be, then those coins are lost.
Yeah. I mean, basically what they should do is they should buy like half of all the Bitcoin and then lose it. That'd be pretty rad.
Yeah. But not like lose it by getting hacked, lose it by being like, the keys fell in the ocean.
Send it to an all zero address so everybody can see that it's fucking gone.
Yeah. That's the proof of reserve.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. I think if we talk to David, that we'll get a little bit more character probably to like what he thinks is realistic, although he probably has his own perspective that may not be realistic, although, you know, he's the main character of Bitcoin for this last year, so he's onto something clearly. I don't know if we go into like that's one aspect of Bitcoin policy. If we go into something else I wrote down was just RFK Jr.'s Bitcoin platform that he ran on, because RFK Jr. was probably like the most Bitcoin friendly candidate that ran in this last election. He did not, I mean, he dropped out, so I don't even think you could vote for him maybe in certain states by the time the election actually happened. But when he was actively campaigning, I mean, he literally said like he holds the majority of his wealth in Bitcoin. So I remember when he presented at Bitcoin 2023, he had like a very fleshed out, like, I will do this, 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 and this. And I was like, oh, someone wrote this for him. Like, and I believe it's Bitcoin Policy Institute that's like, was his advisor. So his sort of points that he made was, if he was president, he would guarantee the right to own Bitcoin. Okay, we're kind of already in that situation. I guess the idea is just like not being unfriendly to it.
It'd probably also make certain kinds of regulation that make it hard to get Bitcoin like go away.
That's true. Yeah, that actually probably matters more on an institutional level. Guarantee the right to run your own node. I feel like that's just kind of preaching to the choir.
Yeah, everybody can run a node. We have free speech. It's pretty good.
Ensure the right to use electricity as you choose. I think that's the aspect that I do actually feel is probably the most under threat in like a Harris administration. Ensure the US remains the global hub of Bitcoin. Okay, that's kind of I would say that's actually the point that Trump makes the most when it comes to Bitcoin. The rest, he's sort of like whatever about. He's like, I'm going to fire Gary Gensler. But like, he's mostly talking about like this America first idea of Bitcoin. 5, he'll recognize that Bitcoin is not a security, but a class of its own. That's pretty commonly accepted already, but I guess it's good to make it explicit. And then finally, at that time, he said he would consider pardoning Ross Ulbricht.
Interesting that actually, I think one of the most important things would be not requiring capital gains on Bitcoin when it is used as a medium of exchange. However, I think maybe that would be one of the best things. I would love that. So I could just spend Bitcoin and not think about the taxes. But that is actually like contra the US dollar.
Yes.
That is like making Bitcoin a more appealing alternative to the US dollar. And the US dollar is like the monkey that laid the golden egg, or however that goes. The golden monkey that laid the goose, or, you know, the golden goose that laid the monkey's egg.
All of the above.
Yeah, all of the above. And like, obviously that might be kind of political suicide, right? That like, you can't fuck with the US dollar. You don't, if you think, okay, people are going to start using Bitcoin for trade, which I actually don't think they would, because I think that there's other reasons that people don't use Bitcoin for trade. You can't be friendly to Bitcoin in ways that it competes with the US dollar.
I mean, again, this is like the Bitcoin Trojan horse, like Bitcoin incentive structure dominating, where it's just like, you know, the more that you personally as a candidate, for example, like if RFK says, I have the majority of my wealth in Bitcoin, is he going to then do things that are favorable to the US dollar? Or favorable to his own bank account? What do politicians usually do?
Yeah. I mean, ideally, all the politicians get Bitcoin over the next like 10 years, and then they all just start being outrageously friendly to it because it's going to pump their bags.
Like they are to any political lobbyist group. They don't care about the American
We need to
people
get Bitcoin in Nancy Pelosi's portfolio. I bet
she already has it.
I don't know.
You don't think so?
Yeah. Also because like the way that Nancy Pelosi like profits is by having like political insider information. So she's buying and selling like major corporations that like, you know, are going to be the result of regulation or not, you know.
She's got her own insider trading degen niche. She doesn't need Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Yeah. But I think, it's like, I don't know. I feel like if you view the US government as a cohesive entity that has its own cohesive incentive structure, yes, I agree.
Huge mistake though.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Is like then yes, they're gonna like a president, a politician, or whatever is gonna be like, no, we can't do something that's gonna be bad for the US dollar. But in actuality, it's like politicians out for themselves. Number one. That's why Joe Biden pardoned Hunter. Which is like, whatever, you would do that. Like,
I would do that. I do that shit. Know? Like, pardon my son, of course.
That's my point, is it's like, at the end of the day, the thing that's most important to you is usually yourself, especially if you're a sociopath politician. So, you know, it's, I don't know, for those of us that want to see less government power, which in theory also some politicians, you know, I think maybe Cynthia Lummis is actually pretty self-aware about what she's doing. Senator from Wyoming probably genuinely actually does want less government control. You know, you could see like a Ron Paul type figure adopting a policy that's favorable to Bitcoin, but not favorable to the US dollar in a genuine, educated way. But you don't even have to be that in order to still, you know, it's just a beautiful circling the drain that happens. So I don't know, in terms of like that platform, I remember at the time when I heard him say it, I was like, wow, this is so crazy. Like summer 2023, spring 2023, like, oh my God, there's a presidential candidate who probably won't win, but he's like someone that people know that is articulating points related to Bitcoin that imply a level of understanding that's deeper than just like, oh, it's fake money on the internet.
Yep.
You know, like I remember hearing that talk and being like, wow, we are entering a crazy era. And it's interesting to see how it's played out, because now it's like I read these points and I'm like, this is actually nothing.
Yep.
You know?
Yep.
But I think that's just how much Bitcoin has like gained narrative control.
Yeah, it really has. I mean, this whole thing is like unthinkable. Even the idea that Trump on day one might sign Bitcoin friendly legislation, which I don't think he will, but that now is within the Overton window.
He's going to end the Russia-Ukraine war on day one. He's going to free Ross on day one.
He's going to have a busy day.
Yeah, he's going to have a really busy January 20th.
Yeah. Should we go on to the tech oligarchs?
Yeah. I feel like I had one last point I wanted to make. Oh, I was just going to say, sort of as like my vibe check for how much Trump will actually do during his presidency. When does he free Ross Ulbricht?
He better do it day one. But he said he would do it day one, right? That's
what I'm saying. That is something that's easy.
Yep.
It's a firm thing he said he will do.
Yep.
And so I feel like if that doesn't happen on day one, you know, you can give him 24 hours, 48 hours, like maybe, you know what I mean? Like it is a good slogan, but maybe in actuality, Ross Ulbricht's already been in jail for 10 years. What's another day?
Yep.
Like if he doesn't pardon Ross Ulbricht next week, I think that's where a lot of this starts to fall apart.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number go down. Like if Ross Ulbricht is not pardoned in the first week of Trump's presidency, number going down.
Yeah.
That's actually the biggest indicator.
The Trump pardons are going to be fucking wild.
They're going to be crazy.
The Trump pardons are going to be, it's his second term. He does not give a shit. Like those pardons are going to be wacky.
Trump pardons How Money podcast and then Patreon has to give all the funds.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, no, I mean, we're going to see some wild ass shit. Like, and also these weird things where like, Trump is like, for some reason, pardoning some crooked, you know, New Jersey lawyer who was involved in criminal racketeering. And you're like, what were they up to together? Like, what is going on? He's lived a long
and storied life.
Yeah.
You know, and this is just him playing out. He's the main character of the world.
Yeah.
You know?
True.
So we're all just living in Trump's reality.
Yeah.
Now.
To my Danish friends, like, guys, you gotta, like, nothing this guy says you can really take seriously. Like, it's okay. He's not going to invade Greenland. Just ignore him. Get your countries out of stagnation. All right. Like, stop letting all the migrants in.
And like, just, you know, present maybe a better argument on your side, you know? Like, I think that's like in a lot of ways, what made Trump more appealing to a lot of people who weren't MAGA was that he brought in people that other people trusted. RFK is a great example. Like RFK is someone like I would have voted for RFK. I know a lot of people who would have voted for RFK. Would RFK have won? Absolutely not. But he's someone that I think people look to as like, you know, if you're in a specific kind of like libertarian farmers market, anti-vax niche, like he's a politician that you trust.
Yep.
And Trump essentially like welcomed those more reasonable voices under his wing, and those reasonable voices endorsed him.
Yep.
And so like, yeah, if you know, your Danish friend or anyone on the left or whatever, anyone who's like very upset by Trump or concerned about Trump, I feel like the thing is you just have to have better, stronger figures on your side of the issue. And then maybe Trump just sort of absorbs those things because with his like insane main character charisma, or maybe you actually can like formidably challenge him in some way that's not just like throwing out some weird token identity politic thing as like a blank canvas for anyone to like manifest their fears into, you know, like try putting out something real.
Yeah,
but also bow down to the leader. This is the next 4 years.
Yeah. The Democratic Party has shown an amazing lack of self-reflection after this defeat. You know, they pushed.
So I'm talking about the girls and gays.
They pushed a lot of policies which are just like political poison, and I haven't really seen a lot of recognition of that.
Yeah.
On their part, maybe
they have been quiet though.
Yeah.
You know, like we didn't see any like marches, demonstrations, whatever. Like there really was not much.
Yeah, thank God for that.
Uproar.
Yeah.
Like it was just kind of like, oh no.
Oh no.
Yeah. I mean, we can get into the tech oligarch vibes with that probably.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about that. This is one of Aaron things. So like, this is an Aaron thing. So Aaron is very like judgy about people's like appearance and their vibe.
Yeah.
And so like you often.
Okay. That makes me sound like I'm like, you know, being like, oh, this person is not dressing a certain way. That means blah.
No, it's usually about their physical appearance. It's not about what they're wearing.
It's like
Aaron's like this person has rat physiognomy. Like that is a lot of.
I think I'm open-minded to different aesthetics and like what I appreciate that people are trying to do different things. Like they don't have to be trying to do my aesthetic for me to find them.
There are multiple aesthetics that you find attractive that are not yours. But then there are many ugly rat physiognomy traps that people can fall into.
Okay, where are you going with this?
I think this is just like
about Zuck.
Yeah. Talk about the tech oligarchs is very much like Aaron, like physiognomy pilled.
I mean, I think it's a good signal that Mark Zuckerberg shifted up his image.
Oh, it's great.
He looks way better. Like,
looks way better.
It's kind of like a weird like white guy cosplay, sort of like, I don't know, like it's definitely put on, but he looks way better. He sounds Jewish? Way better. Yes. Right? Zuckerberg?
Yes, Zuckerberg.
Come on, right?
Sugar Mountain.
Did you look it up?
Yeah, Mark Zuckerberg's Jewish. Not that has anything to do with anything. You know.
Why did we? Oh, well, his aesthetic is very like his rebranding.
Oh yeah, he's definitely cosplaying a non-Jewish white guy.
But he looks like a Jewish white guy trying to look cool.
Yeah, he looks like a Jewish white guy cosplaying a non-Jewish white guy.
But it is an archetype.
Yeah, it's an archetype. Yep.
I mean, I think that the point about
Tim, are we gonna get canceled for this? I'm Jewish, guys.
We talk about Jews all the time.
Yeah, I know. I just want to make it clear when this gets taken out of context. Like, I'm Jewish. I think
we're a very pro-Jewish podcast.
I'm super pro-Jewish. I lit a menorah a little while ago for Hanukkah. Yeah.
I'm not Jewish, but I love the Jews.
Yep.
And I don't wish I was Jewish, but there are certain like things like Shabbat dinner that I really am like, oh, I wish that was like a part of my like traditions. You know, I think Jewish traditions are fun.
Yep.
Anyway, so what was the point you were making about my physiognomy checks?
Oh, but this is a segment where we just judge these people sort of on like things that they said and do, but vibes. Really more on their vibes.
The vibe check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is all apropos of Mark Zuckerberg appearing on the Joe Rogan podcast and basically disavowing everything he did for the last 8 years, 10 years, pretty much. Which, to be clear, Aaron and I are very happy that he's disavowing it.
Yeah, I sent Casey the podcast episode and was like, this is awesome. I'm happy to see this.
Yep.
But he is a snivelly little weasel.
He is a snivelly little weasel. Absolutely. I mean, in 2014, I was on Facebook. It was a very scary place because I was like, holy shit, these people are fucking crazy.
Wait, I think you're kind of out of shot now. No.
I was on Facebook and like, you know, Facebook just got more and more crazy and unpleasant. And it felt like a place where I couldn't have any opinions. Except every 4 years, I would tell everybody that voting was a scam. For some reason, I'm very comfortable. Like, I love the outrage that I get when I tell people that voting is a scam because they get really mad and I don't give a shit at all. Whereas if I said something that, you know, made people say that I was transphobic or homophobic or racist, not like I have any opinions that would make anybody say that, but that would make me feel much worse.
Well, what, like, you're anti-government. What's like the worst you could be by being anti-government? Like, there's no
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah. It's anti-voting. And that like people get mad. People would get so mad at me on Facebook and like these long, like 100 thread like comments after my every election cycle, like voting is a scam post.
Yeah. Well, most people conceive of voting as being the only thing they can do.
It is because they're fucking cucks.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just like, now I would say, you know, on the girls and gays side of things, that's like reeling with like the apocalyptic scenario that they're imagining a Trump presidency to be. They've realized voting, like they kind of are on your same boat in terms of like voting didn't work. Like this is not good. But they have these like weird abstract ideas of like supporting your community. Yeah. You know what I mean? There's like, I think now the rhetoric has shifted a little bit away from voting where now it's these sort of like, you need to educate yourself. You need to be supportive to people in your community. Like these kind of abstract ideas.
Especially minorities.
Yeah, where it's just like, okay.
Should we go out on the street, find some black people to be supportive of? Hey, brother, how you doing?
That is essentially what their model is. You know what I mean? Like they're like, we need to find a token like person that represents this. And then we need to like uplift them. Yeah, right. You know, and not like, and like, we need to hear their perspective and listen and learn and adopt it as our own. And then like also fight other people from our perceived idea of what that person's perspective is. Right. Yeah. Like that, I think 2014, we didn't quite have that language yet.
Sure. Yeah. But so going back to the point that I was making is like, yeah, Zuckerberg was And I worked at Facebook. I think
you were in the belly of the beast.
Belly of the beast, yeah, at Oculus, but it had been totally absorbed into Facebook at that point. And it was crazy. It was all this like BLM shit, and like when Trump got elected, Palmer Luckey, the founder of Oculus, had like donated to like a
I remember
Trump.
this.
I was in like the Oculus town hall meeting where we all sat around. And people talked about how they didn't feel safe because Palmer Luckey had donated to like a Trump supporting organization. I was less politically awakened at the time, but
many such cases.
But like, how would I have felt if I had voted for Trump? And I was like, this is weird.
Yeah.
But anyways, yeah. So Mark Zuckerberg, fully at the helm, completely controls Facebook. He has the majority of the voting stock, and he was fully on board for all of this shit. And now that the Biden administration is on the way out, he's a bro, and he denounces all of his former
masculinity.
He loves masculinity.
And he was actually just listening and learning along with the rest of us.
Yeah, he's hunting hogs. It's like, no, bro, you were at the helm of this shit, and I'm really glad that you're going to turn it around. But like, I don't believe you. But I am happy for your health and fitness journey on a personal level.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good signal for the vibe.
It's a good signal.
It's a great signal to see him sort of bending the knee, kissing the ring, capitulating. He's like, oh man, I want to go on the Joe Rogan podcast and seem like a cool guy. I want to seat at the tech oligarchy table in the Trump administration. Like he is. I encourage people to watch that episode because
it's a great episode. It's a good conversation.
And it is interesting. Like, I think he's a snivelly weevil, but I also think it's interesting.
Weevil? He's a bug now?
Yeah, now he's a weevil. He does have perspective that a lot of people don't have. And I mean, like, he made the point, like, that we think a lot of this censorship conversation is like, we think about it from this like America woke perspective, but actually like censorship is just increasing everywhere, and like we just have our certain way of doing it, our certain like, hate speech is like an example of like this gray area of like what is hate speech, and you can use that fire in a burning building when it comes to like COVID misinformation. Like we have these places where, especially in 2020 or in like the last decade, where we've pushed the boundaries of censorship under these things that technically kind of work within free speech. And also, by the way, tech platforms have no obligation to like uphold free speech. They're private entities. They can choose whatever content they want on their platform. But like in reality, they are like the new public square. He kind of has this perspective on Rogan where he's like, oh, like it was the Biden administration that like was yelling at us to do all these things, and like I was just like going along with it, but like now I see, like, I'm so glad like that, like what Elon did is so great. Like Daddy Elon, he really like showed us all that it's safe for us to do this now. Like basically, like Zuck essentially is doing what everyone is doing now, which is like showing probably I wonder, is this the way he actually felt when it was happening? Do you know what I mean? Like, was he hiding his own sort of like opinions and just kind of bending the knee to whatever's in power? And now he's like, oh, I do feel a little freer now.
Yeah.
Is he just doing a new bending the knee?
I think he's probably doing a new bending the knee. I mean, I don't know.
He probably just doesn't have convictions at all. To be
honest.
I
didn't really know. While I was at Facebook, I didn't see any pushback on like progressivism at all from the upper echelon. It seemed like people were just going along with it.
I mean, if you compare Zuckerberg to Jack Dorsey, right? Like Twitter and Facebook were probably the two entities that had the most power in 2016 and 2020 to influence the narrative in one way or the other. They both kind of did the same thing. Right? They like every platform went along with it until Elon bought Twitter. That was like the first sort of like, except for the kind of like Rumble style, like rogue, like new social media things, like talking about the current oligarchs in power. I think like you can look at Zuckerberg and Dorsey as kind of having the same outcome, but different. They were in different situations. Mark Zuckerberg has control of Facebook. He has the majority of shares. Like he's CEO. The board can't oust him.
And
that's
Facebook,
not the case with Jack Dorsey.
I don't think so. And I also think that Twitter was in financial trouble. Often. Facebook, I don't think so much. So like Jack Dorsey had less latitude than Mark Zuckerberg would have had.
But they both. So I think with Jack Dorsey, like what you saw was he just withdrew. He was like, because Jack Dorsey is very obviously like an anarchist libertarian, like like I think those are his convictions. He wasn't able to execute them while he was in whatever level of power he had at Twitter. So he kind of just like backed away from it and like became like a surfer bro, and now is like bankrolling Noster instead. So Jack essentially abdicated power. He said, like, I don't have enough power. I don't have enough chips to be able to like make a big move here. So I'm just going to back away from this. Zuckerberg, on the other hand, did have the chips, could have done something and didn't. Now he sees Elon having done it and he's like, oh, I want to be
a free man.
Yeah, I want to be
I want to be a real boy.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, I mean, whatever. It's a good signal. It's a good indicator for the vibe shift, but like, wow, like weak.
Very weak.
Weak. But then, you look at like, I think essentially what Mark is trying to do is like, he probably sees someone like Elon and probably other kind of like tech oligarchs as probably going to get a decent amount of political power in this administration. Like, I don't know what the formal level of like any of their involvement will be, but Elon at least is probably like number 2 after Trump. And Elon, I don't think Trump would have won without Elon. Like, I don't think that if Elon hadn't bought Twitter, reinstated Trump's account, campaigned so hard for him, put so much money into that campaign, like, I don't know that Trump would have been able to get back into the narrative the way that he did.
I don't know. I mean,
Trump wouldn't have gone on Rogan if it wasn't for Elon. Like, that's an example.
Just Kamala was so bad though. Like she ran such a weak campaign.
It's possible.
Just like Trump versus Hillary round 1. I think this time there was more repudiation of the Democratic platform, Democratic policies.
Yeah.
Inflation under Biden was quite bad. People reacted to that. But I think it really, both times that Trump has won, it's been the other candidate losing, not Trump winning. That like Hillary Clinton was such a bad candidate. Kamala Harris was such a bad candidate. Like they didn't need a Barack Obama,
sure, like
once in a generation political talent, but I think that a really good Democrat candidate would have given Trump a run for his money both times. Just like Biden did. Yeah,
for sure. A run for, like I agree with you. And obviously we can never know how things would be different because the campaigns, I mean, it just would have been a totally different campaign if there was not like Kamala Harris wasn't a real candidate.
Yep.
She was literally a substitute put in by the Democratic
She was a
Party.
substitute teacher.
Yeah.
It's like a wacky movie about somebody becoming a substitute teacher. And then through a crazy sequence of events,
Madam
they have
President.
to run for president.
Yeah, exactly. Like it almost wasn't even a real campaign, and like, but I think like, if you look at somewhere like Pennsylvania, like Elon put so much money into Pennsylvania.
Yep.
Even things like the Amish generally don't vote. They're pretty like apolitical. I mean, they're not really a part of our society. They voted for Trump. He registered a lot of them to vote, not personally.
I heard that there was some particular thing that happened with the Biden administration and the Amish, some kind of like regulation or tax or healthcare thing. I think it was like they made the Amish throw away a bunch of raw milk or something, and that like radicalized the Amish.
Well, I think the thing is like the Amish often like they are not in a super favorable like political position in general. Like they don't, for example, like they are like a religious institution, but they're not like the Amish institution doesn't like own all of their land, and so they don't get like the tax cuts that churches get. For example.
And they are a very isolationist, reclusive, entity. Like really, they just want to be left alone. Like,
They have their strategy.
They have exceptions to, I believe, paying Social Security and maybe serving in the military. Maybe not, but there's a few things that they actually don't have to do.
Yeah. But in general, they're pretty like. I think they're just very they're super wealthy, super successful, like, hardworking. They're a hardworking demographic.
Yep.
But like, if you contrast it to something like the Mormons in Utah, like the Mormons have a lot of control over Utah politics.
Right. They're a much stronger centralized institute. Amish,
you could have that. You could conceive of a Pennsylvania, for example, where the Amish have a lot more.
Yeah. The Amish, like structurally, I think the highest power within the Amish is the, essentially like relatively small community church, and they don't there is no like overarching superstructure. I think when a church gets too big, they split it up into two churches. Like it's not like this like organized political
that's
thing.
What I mean. So it's like I think there was a huge effort to register Amish people to vote and get them to vote and kind of to make the case that probably like you're talking about, whether it was the raw milk or whatever thing that would have been threatening them. I think just historically speaking, those things have happened and they haven't really cared. It hasn't really mobilized them.
Yep.
It does take like on the ground, door to door type of shit with them.
Yep.
And with any group.
Yep.
I mean, that's like what a lot of it comes down to. I think that's why Barack Obama was ultimately successful, like over Hillary Clinton, was like Obama had a much bigger on the ground going door to door operation in terms of like, like vote for Barack Obama over Hillary Clinton in the primary. So like, I think without Elon, maybe Trump would have still won just because the Democrats were such a mess, but he owes a lot to Elon.
For sure.
And like, I do think Elon will have a lot of power in the administration, even if, you know, like the worst case scenario, I think, is that they have like a clash of egos.
Yeah.
You know?
And also thinking about like Trump owing Elon, Trump doesn't just owe Elon. The Republican Party will know that they want to be in Elon's good graces for the next election. So that Elon will use X and his resources to mobilize for JD Vance or whoever the next candidate is.
Yeah. And if you can compare like, you know, the power that TradFi has had over politics for the last couple decades, tech is the new TradFi in terms of like, you know, multi-billion or trillion-dollar
also
ecosystem.
Tech is also the new media, and media has also had a lot of influence over politics.
Yeah. So I think like, you know, I think you could probably say like 2016 was maybe the first election where the internet had a huge sway. But I feel like this is the first election where tech as like an organized, like bureaucratic class has a big sway. Previously, and I think this is also going back to the Zuckerberg on Rogan thing, tech has kind of just fallen in line. To sort of be like, okay, this is what the government wants from us. We kind of don't want to like have this antagonistic relationship. Let's just go with it.
All of the tech people are basically Bay Area liberals. Yeah. Right? They
definitely the culture.
They came from this like Bay Area liberal stock. And so it took a lot of real craziness from the Democrats for them to start moving away from that.
Yeah.
And now they're sort of more intellectually, politically independent than they have been in the past. They sort of have more of their own ideas. Some of them are going and becoming Republicans. Others are just still really on the left, but much more critical of, you know, Democratic craziness. Yeah. So they sort of are emerging as a distinct sort of political like area of thought and like influence.
Yeah. I mean, it's a good point about it's not just money, it's also media. Like we were having the conversation before this episode that I wanted to just talk about on here of like, you know, Elon is kind of putting forward this rhetoric of like X is the free speech platform, which in some ways is true.
It's true. It's more free speech than it was before, you know?
But the thing I have not like made up my mind about is like, you know, I think in 2016, 2020, whatever, you know, these kind of like big election years where the left or maybe like the wokes, whatever group you want to call them, has controlled more of the narrative in terms of censorship or like the tools, the master's tools. There was always this feeling of, well, you can't, you know, you might think that it's great that we are banning people who are like doing hate speech, basically, like that's like an egalitarian goal that we have as a society of like, you know, equality and like treating people nicely and fairly and whatever. And so like, you know, even if the tech companies are overreaching in some way, that it's ultimately a good. I don't know this time around where we have Elon being, you know, a crazy political donor, having so much political influence, X being essentially the town hall of media. Are we doing the same thing now? Yeah,
I mean, X is a political tool of Elon Musk. And I like the way he's using it. I like his goals, you know, I'm not opposed, but that's what it is. It's a political tool of Elon Musk, and he's going to fuck with the algorithm and, you know, raise some things up and push other things down according to his like political whims and his political aims. And okay, that's fine.
I mean, I think like from the perspective from your sort of like super capitalist perspective, it is essentially saying that the market or whoever has the most money is getting more control over politics. Like, I think that's in line still with what you would want ideologically.
No. I mean, I think it's a flaw of the government that it is susceptible to lobbying.
Sure.
Like, as a capitalist, I don't think that it is good whenever any particular interest group gets control of government. That's bad. So you know, if private entities make the government get out of their way, that is pro-capitalist. That's good. I'm all in favor of that. If private entities get the government to do what they want and favor them and favor their political aims, that is bad. That is anti-capitalist.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I think that's clearly what Elon, Mark, anyone in that position of power would want.
Libertarians don't get any power.
That's why Jack Dorsey's in Costa Rica surfing, funding Nostr.
It's just like communists and anarchists. You know, every kind of like socialist movement, you get communists and anarchists, right? And the anarchists are the like, oh, we're gonna community organize. We're gonna like everything's gonna be bottom up. It's gonna be every man, free men. You know, trading as equals. Blah 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 blah. And the communists are the one who have the political will. They're like, no, we're gonna have a massive fucking state. We're gonna control everything. We're gonna drag everybody kicking and screaming to the communist utopia. And the communists fucking murder the anarchists.
Yeah.
The anarchists are completely marginalized and literally fucking murdered. They're useful at the beginning. And it's the same vibe between libertarians and crony capitalists.
Yeah.
Right? The libertarians are like, no government, blah, 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 blah. And the crony capitalists are like, yeah, let's get the government to like favor us. Let's get the government to suppress competition under the guise of like, you know, let's make the government favorable to businesses. Yeah,
I mean, that's essentially the argument that Mark Zuckerberg makes by the end of the Rogan episode is like, he's like, oh, I just think we should live in an America where we want to see American companies do well. You know, I just think the government should really want to support American companies. Mm-hmm. It's like, you want the government to support your American company.
Yeah, right.
That's actually what you're saying.
Yep. Yeah.
So
it's hard because
they're all bad guys.
In common speech, the word capitalism is actually synonymous with crony capitalism.
Yeah,
that's what people mean. But the reason that the government is bad is because it can be captured by all these different kinds of entities that then try to get it to do what they want and line their pockets, basically.
The daddy spit in my mouth.
Yeah.
Insert clip here.
Yeah.
Yeah. That said, you know, I do really commend Elon for like doing his thing.
Yep.
Like, he was not cowardly.
Yep.
He did try to make moves.
Yep.
And I think, like, you know, I tend towards more of a tear it all down perspective in general. That doesn't mean I think that always ends up in the best outcome, especially not in the short term. Mm-hmm. But like, I think there's obviously things that are like catastrophically broken. And like, if the leadership perspective, which is what the leadership perspective has been, mm-hmm. is to just manage the decline, like, we're ending up in the same place as if like someone who did have a vision tried to do something and then it like ended up having certain negative effects. You know what I mean? Like, so I think like if you're in a position of leadership and power, which like if you're the wealthiest man in the world, which Elon Musk is, or he's close to it, like you are in a position of power, to show some level of vision and leadership feels appropriate, mm-hmm. rather than, you know, the Zuckerberg perspective of like, we just went along with it. Now that there's this new thing, we're going to go along with that too.
Yep.
You know, like that's not a leader. That's just you being everybody else. And like, I don't think that means we should take away all your money or whatever. Like, but it's just, it's snivelly behavior.
It is
cowardly, snivelly behavior.
I agree.
And I don't like to see it.
Yep.
So
rad physiognomy. You heard it here
yeah,
first.
Exactly. If you didn't already know. Is there anything else we should
No, I think that's
cover?
it. We've been going forever. This
we
is
have
a long rip.
Yeah, we're just vibing on the vibe shift. Yeah, I think we're gonna.
I'm excited. excited.
Yeah,
the next 4 years, it's gonna be wacky. We're gonna take Greenland. We're gonna take Panama. Bitcoin 200K. Okay, it's gonna be some wacky ass shit. The libtards are gonna be fuming. So very excited.
I hope they figure their shit out and they restructure, because there's a lot that I agree with them on. Like, just I'm not like a super hardcore ideological any direction. I'm pretty politically homeless. I have mm-hmm. like a couple beliefs I feel very strongly about.
Yep.
But generally speaking, like, I think there's perspectives that the left, the libtards, whatever you want to call them, they are right about. Mm-hmm. And they should try to position them correctly rather than try to force everyone to agree with them.
For sure.
So yeah, I mean, next 4 years, Great American Empire.
Let's fucking
We'll see
go.
how it goes.
Yeah.
At the very least, there will be a lot to podcast about.
Oh yeah.
You know?
Oh, yeah. This is a political podcast
This is a political podcast now. This episode, next episode will definitely be political podcast. And then probably
the rest of them until 2028.
Yeah, so unsubscribe now.
Yeah.
It's not interesting. If you've listened to this and you're like, oh my God,
unsubscribe,
these guys are idiots. They have no
make
idea
sure
what they're talking about.
that the little bell icon is not clicked so you can disable notifications.
Block us.
Yeah, block us. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Also, vibe shift, we both have Aura rings now.
Yeah, that's right.
A major vibe shift for How Many Podcasts.
Yeah, trying to get my sleep on point.
2025, we're taking care of our health.
Yeah, we're rejuvenation athletes, as Brian Johnson says.
So yeah, we'll see you guys on the other side of the Trump presidency.
Yep.
Or at least in the murk.
Yep.
And depth of the Trump presidency. And we love you guys.
We love you guys. Take care. Don't be too mad.
Please.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye.